Hi there, everyone. Welcome. My name's Ian Rustin. I'm the coordinator for the Hume Tech Lecture Series here at SDSU. Thank you for joining us today. I just wanted to say a quick word. This event today is one part of a larger series of events we're holding this spring, many of which we're partnering with the Digital Humanities Center here at the library. So I hope to see many of you at some of our other events. I just wanted to briefly showcase we're going to be hearing from a couple of different guest speakers next month. Amrit Borsuk is going to be having a conversation with our own Jessica Pressman about how digital formats are shaping the novel and poetry. We're also going to have a visitor from Stanford, Brian High, who runs a lab that has released the world's first generative AI tool that creates novel phages, bacteriophages, for the treatment of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. But you know, it has exciting medical implementations, but also raises interesting questions about what it means to live in a future where algorithms are participating in the evolutionary process. So that promises to be a very interesting conversation. I hope many of you can come join us for it. If you'd like to keep an eye out for news about our events, you can visit SDSU. Hume Tech is HUMTECH. All right. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dustin.
All right. Thank you all so much for attending. This is one of my kind of dream events to have on campus, to just hear the amazing kind of community advocacy that people are doing around organizing around AI data centers. So I've had the pleasure of speaking with these folks all day today and in other capacities, and I think we're in for a real treat. So I'm excited to facilitate the conversation around powering AI in the borderlands, organizing against data centers. And my name is Dustin Edwards, and I am an associate professor of rhetoric and writing studies here at SDSU, and I also direct the Writing Center. So again, I have the immense pleasure of introducing our speakers and moderating today's discussion. Before I do that, though, I want to just offer a few words of thanks. Special thanks to Pam Lack, who I don't think is here, but her presence is here, in the Digital Humanities Center, Patrick Flanagan, who helps set everything up, and Ian as well, Ian Rustin, to help organize this event. And special thanks to our College of Arts and Letters Dean, Todd Butler, who has been really steadfast in his support of this event. And again, I just want to thank you all for coming out today. There's a million things happening in this world that are captivating our attention, so I'm really pleased that you all are here for this conversation that can be quite dreadful in some ways, but I think there is a lot of hope, and there's a lot of power in the organizing testimony that we're going to hear today as well. And so I hope we kind of hold on to that in our discussion today. So without further ado, I am going to introduce our speakers, and then I'll talk a little bit about the format, and then there'll be plenty of time for Q&A from you all as well. I asked for the Q&A, if you have a question, a mic is going to be passed around. We're just recording this event so that the audio can be picked up. Okay, so sitting next to me, I have Annie Ersinghaus. Annie is an award-winning independent filmmaker from Las Cruces, New Mexico. She enjoys the art of storytelling and finds passion in documentary filmmaking, especially when it involves environmental issues in the West. Her most recent film, The Land of Sacrifice, The Burden of Oil and Gas Extraction, has been screened across the state of New Mexico and will feature in the Durango Independent Film Festival and the Las Cruces International Film Festival. And some of the images that you might have been seeing at the beginning of the film were part of Annie's work, as well as Gilberto's. Okay, and then our next guest today is Daisy Maldonado. Daisy is a community advocate for environmental justice, public health, and climate preservation in southern New Mexico. She works alongside New Mexico's Colonia communities that have long faced unsafe infrastructure, lack of healthcare access, and limited political power. Her advocacy focuses on clean water, air quality, infrastructure equity, and ensuring communities most impacted by oppressive systems have meaningful voice in decision-making. Under her leadership, residents have organized to expand access to arsenic water testing, improve transportation safety, advance public health education, and challenge processes that limit public participation in land use and development decisions. And her work has been recognized by the Center for Disease Control and Muslim advocates and featured in regional media, including KRWG, which is a Las Cruces a publication, and Las Cruces Community Radio as well. Okay, and then our next speaker today, I realized I had their names up, so I'll show that. Our next speaker today is Gilberto Manzanares, who is a community advocate and educator from Calexico, California, focused on environmental justice and government transparency in the Imperial Valley. As the founding member of Valle Imperial Resiste, he has helped organize residents around issues of water, air quality, and the local impacts of large-scale industrial projects, data centers among them. His work centers on translating complex public policy into accessible information through multimedia storytelling, public education, and civic engagement. Manzanares is part of a resident-led coalition raising concerns about proposed data center developments in the Imperial Valley and their potential impacts on energy use, water resources, and community accountability. So a little bit, please welcome our speakers, though. We can, yeah. And I'll share a little bit on format, and then we'll get into some questions. So I'm going to facilitate a conversation with our panelists for about 45 minutes or so. And at that point, we'll open up the conversation to questions from you all in the audience. And again, if you have a question, in order to capture the audio, we just ask that you wait until the microphone, and then you can ask your question then. Okay. So before we get into questions, I figured I would just say a little bit about what data centers are, just very basic details, and then we'll get into the questions. So we're all kind of in a starting point. So what are data centers? Data centers have been around for a long time. They first started as small closets or small rooms, but the advent of cloud computing and the relatively recent boom, of internet traffic has required what we now call co-location centers or hyperscale data centers. And these are massive, massive buildings. What I'm showing here is the NSA Utah data center, which is in Utah. They are usually very industrial looking. They have no windows, and they have lots of security around them. And inside them are rows upon rows of servers. And although they vary in their use, these servers are often doing constant computational work. They typically get really hot from this. And so they require different cooling methods to cool them down. And many cooling methods most involve water, and they use fresh water in particular to keep the machines from overheating. And as we've probably seen in lots of headlines right now, they require a lot of energy and power. In recent years, data center infrastructure has changed to accommodate training large language models or inferencing queries once those models have been trained. So given the intense demands of this training, AI data centers require even more energy and more expensive server components, what are often called GPUs or graphic processing units. And what scholars from media studies and infrastructure studies have shown is that data centers include a full stack of extraction, and our guests will speak of that today, and that includes water, energy, plastics, minerals, and of course, labor that is used to further fine-tune models, large language models, and rid models of harmful or pornographic or violent content. And right now, in the name of AI advancement, we are seeing a boom of AI data center development. McKinsey projects that 3 to 7 trillion will be spent on data centers between 2025 and 2030. I can't wrap my head around that number, but that seems like a lot. And these data centers are getting larger and larger in terms of their energy demand. Individual data center campuses will now require the energy amount of entire cities. And given that so much of this development is needing to scale so quickly to win the AI arms race, developers are turning to fossil fuels to power these facilities. Okay, so I just wanted to get us all on the same grounding, and then we'll turn it over to some conversation. So the first part of the conversation is called placing data centers. And I was hoping that maybe we could start with Project Jupiter in New Mexico. And so Annie or Daisy, would you mind kind of setting the scene for us? First, can you explain what Project Jupiter is, what the scale and scope of this project is, who is developing it, and who are the end users?
I'll start and you want to hop in?
Yeah.
So me and Daisy are both from Las Cruces, New Mexico, fighting the same project, Project Jupiter. So it's a $165 billion project about an hour away from where we live, in a sort of unincorporated-ish community. And this data center, after being voted through by our county commissioners, was then we then found out that it was Oracle and OpenAI. So we found out that's who it's for. They're building their own power generation for this plant specifically that will, of course, rely on natural gas. And just some numbers so you can kind of understand how big this project is. It will emit almost twice the yearly amount of CO2 emissions as the entire state of New Mexico. Just this one data center. It will emit 4 times our local utility CO2 and 12 times as much as our city itself in this one data center. So I don't know if there's anything else to add.
Yeah. Well, this project came to New Mexico. What we found out later on, there's a big vote about $165 billion industrial revenue bonds that our county commission passed in September. And as time passed, we found out that the project itself had been proposed for New Mexico for some time, and that actually our state governor rubber stamped it along with our economic development department as well as our environment department. And so it was decided in sort of the power center of our state in northern New Mexico and sort of shoved down into southern New Mexico, telling local legislators and local electeds that they'd have to pass these ordinances to give these companies the opportunity to come in and construct this project. And so the project itself, again, has been dubbed as a tech campus. It will include 4 data centers, so not just 1, but 4. And then the energy generation that Annie's talking about is also 2. It's not 1. I know that they want to say that it's 2 different energy generation plants. However, it really is just 1 that's going to serve that data center, those 4 data centers themselves. And it is in an unincorporated area of our county. It's a mile away from the U.S.-Mexico border, 6 miles away from the closest high school and elementary school. Seemingly it's out in the desert in the middle. I don't know if you guys can see the map where the red dot is, but in fact, there's a whole community there in Sunland Park, Santa Teresa, El Paso, and Ciudad Juarez to the south, which has about 2.5 million people. And so the environmental and climate impacts is not in the middle of nowhere, right? It really does have quite a bit of downstream impact.
Awesome. Thanks for setting the scene for us. And then maybe if you all can also talk a little bit more about the landscape there, talk about maybe what the desert means to you, what it means to use maybe so much water to cool this particular data center.
Yeah, I think like the desert to me is, I find it really valuable to have a space to go and just be silent. Like about 10-20 minutes away from my house, I can go out into the desert and hear nothing and look around me and see nothing. And to me, that's not an area that's ready for new buildings and things. Like I find value in the fact that there is nothing, right? And then there is just desert. And so this being built in this area, it's, you know, they find these lands like, oh, they're ready for usage. But to us, like, these are our backyards and we value this open space. And, you know, looking in this, like, at this picture, we all share the same valley. And we all breathe the same air. And we've already all struggled with bad air quality because El Paso's big, Ciudad Juarez is big. They all already, you know, are emitting a lot. And this massive project is going in and is going to almost double like that, all the air quality that is already we're already dealing with all the pollution. So yeah, it's a little scary.
Yeah, and for me anyway, like I was saying this earlier when we were speaking to the class that when I think of the desert, it's like that's my home. I've lived in many other, several other places, but I'm definitely a desert person. I was born and raised in El Paso, and I've made Las Cruces, New Mexico, my home. But I will speak specifically about Sunland Park and Santa Teresa, which is the community that I had been organizing in for many years now. And really, for me, that those communities and where this data center is going to be placed is definitely seen that as a sacrifice zone, because not only, just thinking alone about the energy generation, that community already has another energy generation plant just down the street, a mile away. I mean, it's kind of in the middle, as well as a public dump that they've put in right behind residential communities. And it's also, again, along the U.S.-Mexico border. So like I said, the data center itself will be 1 mile away from there, but that community itself is also right along the border. And again, that's part of the desert landscape. That is our backyard. And it's disappointing that people will see it that there's nothing there. Supposedly there's nothing there. So coming and constructing this tech campus shouldn't be seen as a big deal, right? It's not going to cause any problems, but in fact, it'll cause many problems. So it's our home, and it shouldn't be, open for business and exploitative in the way that industry wants to do, and come in and just take what we have and decide it's for them.
Awesome. Thank you. And right now, I think we might transition into screening a little bit of a documentary that Annie has put together. And it's really a spliced down version, so it's just 3 minutes, I think, or maybe even less, 2 minutes. But it's just to get a sense of the water and the particular source of water that this data center is drawing from. So maybe I'll head to that screen, and then if you want to maybe set up the doc in any way or talk about it, and then we could view it together.
Yeah, I think that's a question. We talk about air pollution because those are easy numbers on paper that the data center has provided for us up until this point, and right now water is still a question mark. Really, we have the numbers for the data center itself, but not for the power generation, and that's going to require much more water than the data center itself. So those numbers are still up in the air. Meanwhile, the Rio Grande runs through Las Cruces, and in northern New Mexico, it has a little bit more water, but as it reaches us, it is empty. It's sand. And so every year they turn on the river for irrigation season, and the river's full for a couple months, and then it ends. And it didn't used to be that way. It used to run year round. Before we put dams up, the river was free, So this video kind of shows how it is to celebrate the water coming back, but also we mourn it being gone in the first place. So this is sort of a structure and background of what our water is in Las Cruces and New Mexico.
It was boiling. Don't you know I need you? You know that I need you. You know that I need you.
So we hopefully got a sense of why water matters in this particular location. In the interest of time, we're going to move to talk about those data center project that he's been fighting. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the data center project in Imperial Valley. What is the scale and scope of this particular data center that we have on the screen right now?
So what you're seeing right now, that is, as of today, California's largest proposed data center. And you are seeing it being placed right next to residential homes. The distance is around 120 feet from the nearest home. So some of the organizers, some of the people that are organized with back home in the valley, their backyards are quite literally facing what is proposed California's largest data center, and it is being basically fast-tracked because the developer himself has admitted that he designed the project itself so that it wouldn't really qualify for CEQA, which means that we don't really know the amount of effects that it can have on us, right? Like California Environmental Quality Act doesn't apply to this project. So California's largest proposed data center is utilizing loopholes in the system to try to be built. In fact, what you're seeing right now doesn't even need to be voted by the Board of Supervisors because it's being declared, it fits in the parameters of by right approvals. So it doesn't even need anyone to vote yes or no. So we can't even hold our public officials accountable on the record if they approve this or if they don't approve it. As of right now, it is delayed because we organized very quickly from the moment that we found out to the next planning commission meeting that would have approved a ministerial process. Usually it's sitting on about 9 different parcels, and all they need as of today is a fairly simple process of voting to approve to merge those parcels, and then once they're merged, that starts to get built. So we pretty much organized quickly, walked neighborhoods, utilized storytelling and social media to rally people up, and within 3 weeks we were able to flood the supervisor chambers, and the planning commissioners basically delayed it until there's more information, like workshops and stuff like that, and we haven't heard anything since. So as of today, that project is currently delayed. However, I mean, you can just see, for me, this type of developments is kind of like just another chapter of extraction in our community, because we've seen this many times before. We have a billion-dollar industry, multi-billion-dollar industry that's agricultural, while the farmers keep all the wealth and profits. The people who pick that food live still in poverty, very much like my grandfather, who retired until the age of 85 from field working, never acquired any wealth. And then we saw the same with solar panels coming over and telling us that we're going to become this technology-based community now with the installment of solar panels, until we found out that all of that energy is actually coming over here to the county of San Diego. But we are pretty much, in all essence of the word, like a sacrifice zone for all of these extractive industries, where they just kind of utilize us and then leave us once their projects are up and running. So this, for me, it's the latest chapter of extraction, but not only that, it's the most brazen one, because in some communities, they try to at least put them in the desert or something like that, which the impacts will be the same regardless where you put them, right? But when you put them in a place so close to families, there's an elementary school currently being built. It hasn't even been finished. In one of the, right outside the picture, there's a brand new elementary / junior high school being built. Still, the wooden beams are still up and there. So for us, it's just how much this industry is really want to steamroll over communities, not even allowing us to raise our voices, whether we are in opposition or in favor of them. Because if we wouldn't have found out, which thankfully we found out through social media, this would have been today already being built. The by right approval process doesn't allow for public input. It doesn't need votes. So then as we steamroll communities for development of AI, then where is our voices, right? So that's pretty much the Imperial Data Center at the moment, right there, right over the mountains.
And this is the map of where that proposed data center is going. All right, thanks, Gilberto. You anticipated my next question to kind of
That's why I stopped.
Perfect. No, I love it. So we'll move now to a section on kind of questioning data centers, and here we've glossed the major concerns, but I wonder if you want to go into detail of any of the major concerns that made you start to question the particular data center, and maybe about there we could start with you and then work our way.
Sure. So, at least in my capacity, quite a few of us already knew that data centers would eventually make their way to the valley because of, I'm sure, have anyone heard about Lithium Valley right? So the County of Imperial is utilizing that as a way to also sneak in other industries. They have this Lithium Valley specific plan, which is a general framework for like how Lithium Valley will develop and like run. And the County of Imperial thought it was a good idea. Like, hey, why don't we just also push other industries while we're at it? So we're looking at hydrogen plants. We're looking at data centers that, of course, were sneaked in there. So the current plan as it stands allows for data centers up to 1.3 million square feet, which is even bigger than the one that you just saw, to be basically built by right once again. So they don't need CEQA, they don't need public input or hearings, and they don't need a vote. And that basically is opening the floodgates for all of these data center developments to come set up shop and basically push the community aside because they're basically development at all costs. We don't really care what you guys have to say. And that is aside from the Imperial Data Center as well. The Imperial Data Center is just the most brazen example of how much they don't actually care where they put them as long as they can put them. In the north end of the Imperial Valley is where they're actually opening the doors for all of these data centers, where already has California's largest environmental crisis, which is the shrinking of the Salton Sea. 1 out of 4 children that live near the Salton Sea has asthma. We already have the Imperial Valley, the highest hospitalization rates for respiratory illnesses among children in the state. So all of these things matter when we're talking about development without any sort of safeguards. So that's...
Yeah, so for me, in terms of questioning data centers, and again, this will go back to Sunland Park and Santa Teresa community where I had been organizing, and we had been in the fight for safe, clean drinking water for that community for several years. And the water provider there was in and out of compliance in providing water that was free from arsenic. And so, yeah, so the water provider was actually sending arsenic contaminated water to its customers. And so, yeah, so we're trying to fight that. And so when we heard about the data center project coming, we thought, oh dear, this is going to make things even worse, right? Because if people here can't even access clean, safe drinking water and a data center is going to come in, then that's going to be the priority, right? Because all these millions of dollars are coming into our community. And then what does that mean for Sunland Park and Santa Teresa community residents? And so that's where sort of we started our fight with the organizing and saying like no to the data center on that basis alone, right? It's like you cannot come into our community. This will make our water crisis even worse. And then as the project continued and we started to learn more, it was just very unfortunate that we found out, about, again, stuff that happened at the state level, that everybody, a lot of the elected officials signed non-disclosure agreements with the companies. There was lots of secrecy on the project itself. A lot of the information we had been asking for that we have a right to, that's supposed to be public record, was being stated to be proprietary information that we couldn't access. And and the electeds whom we had already established really, I thought I established good working relationships with, we really went quiet and very silent up until the vote. And then they all just said yes without even considering the community voice. And so how is it that that was allowed? And without taking into consideration all of the negative consequences that can come from it. And just sort of looking at some numbers and, some, I guess, a nice kickback for allowing these data centers to come into our communities. But in fact, again, really not thinking about the consequences.
Yeah, just to add to what Daisy's saying is, so we had the vote that allowed, construction had already sort of started, some things had already happened before the vote that really finalized the payment and the details for our data center. So it is in the middle of being constructed. It's basically gotten a yes, but there was a vote on September 19th, and that was like the finalizing IRB vote. The public had 3 weeks before that to know anything. The county had set up meetings, and they were really, I wasn't able to actually attend any, but they were really just, places to be like, hey guys, this is great, let's do it, like less hearing from the community and more like highlighting and marketing this data center. And so we had 3 weeks, and then this vote happened, and all of our commissioners, except for one who actually wanted to delay, said yes, and it moved on. And we, at that point, they signed documents that were incomplete still. There were pages missing. They didn't even have all the details, but they were told, hey, if you don't say yes to this, it's going to go elsewhere. And so there was a lot of, we didn't even know details for power generation at that point. We didn't have the numbers for CO2 that I read off to you guys. We had vague explanations on water, closed loop systems. We had no information. And the community was there, and we were saying no, but it was very clear that our commissioners had already decided, and this vote on the September 19th was sort of just to like check off the box and say, okay, we went through that, we listened, even though we were going to make the decision either way. And it felt like this had been planned for a long time by our government in the state of New Mexico and by these big companies, and they were just like, hey, we want this here, and it's going to happen, and that's sort of what's happened so far. So
Okay, I want to move a little bit into talking about your organizing and how you all were able to organize so quickly, and some of the strategies that this is the hopeful part of the conversation, right? I think this is the way that we see like community in action moving really quickly. So yeah, if maybe Annie, if you want to start us out to talk about a little bit about what organizing has looked like for you, and then I know Daisy, it's probably looks a little bit different, and Gilberto a little bit different. But like, how did you get the word out? How did you motivate people to, fight against a data center? Which, first of all, you probably have to explain what a data center, right? There's like a lot of education pedagogy that goes into this. So, yeah, maybe Annie, if you want to take the first swing at that, and then we can.
Yeah, I think we, like a lot of our community, I'd have to say we weren't prepared before the September 19th vote. I think we could have done a lot more, but we just we weren't prepared. We didn't even have groups together. I think I'd been doing work on the river and oil and gas in the state of New Mexico, and then heard about this happening, and everything about it was wrong. Red flag, like we don't have the right information. And then I think the main thing was like, this is $165 billion. Like that's how big this thing is. So I think because we didn't have these numbers on CO2, that was the number I would tell people as I'd be like, hey guys, I'll go up to random folks. Have you heard of Project Jupiter? Okay, it's this $165 billion data center being built, and we have no information, if this is so good, then why are they hiding? Like, shouldn't they be clear about all of this, about how good this is going to be for our economic growth and jobs? And so I think that's how I approached it, because before that vote, we really had no little information. And so since then, we've been able to get more of a group together that's been a little clearer on things and actions to take. But at that point, we weren't ready. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say so. Again, in the communities in Sunland Park and Santa Teresa, so we had been already organizing around water. So, and not that this was like a natural transition, but it sort of just fell in our lap. And I was like, okay, no, this is another fight for the water that we need for our community. And so our organizing is really face-to-face, in person, and first, explaining what a data center is. And explaining how, even though that the companies are coming in with lots of propaganda, promises of jobs, and promises of, other sort of financial payments, that's actually in reality, those are lies, and their claims that they're making to our community, because we know that in other places, companies often do this. These are the same tactics that they utilize, right? And so it was really conversations, again, one-on-one with people and during community meetings, during other gatherings to say, hey, do you actually, like, where do you want and how do you see your future happening if you don't have access to clean, safe drinking water? If, your air is contaminated so bad that, your kids are growing up with asthma. And so we were able to sort of shift that over, but it did have to happen very quickly. And we, at this public hearing that Annie's talking about on September 19th, the other thing is that the decisions are made in the city of Las Cruces, which is an hour away from Sunland Park in Santa Teresa. So we were able to bus in about 40 people, but also the hearing was on a Friday morning at 9 a.m. So people that wanted to attend really couldn't, right? They're not going to take off work or school. And so I thought that was a huge success. So we were able still to get 40 people to show up. And the public hearing ended up taking at about 7 hours. And so in the middle, we're, going to get food and getting people fed so that they can stick around and give public comment, but really trying to educate the community about the truth behind data centers and what it actually means for community, and really counter the propaganda, right, that those companies were spewing about all the wonderful things that would come with a data center.
I think in my case, we've done quite a bit of like digital organizing. We realized that, like, I think it's something that you can apply to the entire country, but there's a very important aspect of winning the narrative battle. And in our county, the developer was fully counting on the fact that like the project falls within the parameters of like by right approval. So they were like, we don't need to sell this to the community at all. Like, as long as the project falls under the parameters, like, we don't need a vote, we don't need CEQA, we don't need anything. So they weren't really counting on then having to explain anything at all to the community. But when they found out, everyone was starting to like ask questions like, wait a second, like, in my backyard, and like, you're building what, and what is that for? So immediately we started like providing education for people like through social media. And once that caught on, we utilized that momentum to translate that into like boots on the ground organizing. So we organized specifically like in the neighborhood that you just saw. There's a small park, and we know that those people are going to be the ones that are going to be more engaged because their livelihoods and their home values are the ones that like they're preoccupied for that. So we started knocking on doors, and then quickly we realized that it's not really just knocking on doors and telling them like, hey, they're going to build this next to your house, because a lot of like elderly people, they're like, what is a data center and what is AI? Mm-hmm. So we quickly realized that we had to also provide education for our organizers on what is CEQA, what is by right approvals. Like, when we had people finally like through the momentum, like after 3 weeks of knocking on doors, some nonstop social media coverage, which again, we kind of caught them on the jump on that because they weren't prepared for that. Now that the project's delayed, now they're trying to sell us the narrative, and ironically hiring our own journalists, getting paid to promote propaganda. Quite literally, they're on the payroll. So by day they write a newspaper article about the data center, and then on their own time they're providing propaganda at the same time. So they essentially bought our own newspapers back home. Things, small town things, I think. And so when people finally came to the planning commission, we also had to educate them on how does this meeting work? How do I comment? So we had people there, basically, essentially, like kind of telling them, like, hey, you have to fill out this paper. You have to turn it into that lady over there. In our case, it's a lady, right? So, and quite frankly, like many of these people, first time ever going to a planning commission meeting or a meeting on governance in general. We had one of the most impactful testimonies that I heard, and that meeting was from a nurse who had just worked a 12-hour shift. And she showed up to the meeting still in her scrubs and gave a very powerful statement, basically saying, like, I had no idea, but my daughter told me to come here because you guys are planning to build this in my backyard. So we went from like organizing through digital media, ironically, like through Instagram and stuff like that. So all those stuff is in some data center, to actually like harnessing that energy and that momentum into boots on the ground, organizing, knocking on doors, started making lists of organizers and volunteers who are going to be there for us when we call them, right? Because you have like your passive people that might show up to protest, whatnot, and then you have your really committed people who are organizing with you, right? So we started to build like identifying core organizers, identifying core volunteers, and that's how we are kind of operating at the moment. So
Awesome. And we have actually a video that Roberto's put together to kind of just display some of the storytelling that he's been able to do. So I'll play that.
I'm here because my granddaughter told me, Mom, Nana, can you please go and speak out regarding
This is the nurse, by the way.
against our youngest in the future? I'm sorry, I work 12 hours speaking extra and work really hard for good. I don't want to sell my house in case this construction continues in the valley. The valley is beautiful, the people is beautiful, our community is beautiful.
The county not too long ago had us restricted in water, had us restricted in electricity. All of a sudden, AI center comes in and we have enough water, we have enough electricity. What happened? This data center hogs enough electricity and water to supply electricity to an entire city. How on God's earth is this okay? The affected homes, Victoria Ranch, Posada del Sol, courtyard condominiums that are still being constructed. Victoria Ranch is still constructing. An elementary school is being constructed still. You have Cross Elementary. You guys have to remember, these are our homes. You are taking this away from us. Please.
Let's keep it down or we're gonna take a break. I'm here because my family, other people's families matter about what we're doing. They keep saying that we're gonna have more jobs, which is a lie. Eventually there'll be about 15 jobs at the end. If you're gonna be doing that and you're willing to destroy a whole community and county just for these type of little temporary things, it's devastating. Because I gotta look in my daughter's eyes and tell her, Dad, what's going on with our neighborhood? Why are we either having these weird noises, all this pollution going on, and everything going on here, and I didn't stand up for it. Every place this has gone to has destroyed communities.
Is it because we have 22% unemployment rate? Because we're a disinvested community made up of primarily of people of color? They think we're gonna lay down and take what little we can get, settle for the scraps that they deign to throw at us.
The environmental concerns that we have are getting worse by the second. I mean, look at the air you're breathing. You can't see the hill, you can't see Mount Signal. I've got a son that's got asthma.
This plan to build a data center right next to our homes and in the middle of Imperial is one of the most short-sighted endeavors you guys could engage in. You are willing to risk grid strain and potential higher electric rates for us residents just to please an outside corporation.
Let me be very clear. There is a lot of money in this room right now, whether it's landowners, whether it's investors, whether it's developers, union laborers, coalitions, nonprofits. There's a lot of money in this room. But listen to your residents. Listen to your residents because they're telling you unanimously, we don't want this data center.
Okay. Aptly, we'll turn now to data centers and democracy. So I want to transition and talk about democratic practices and data centers, and you all have already spoken about that in some ways. But I do want to just say, in December 2025, a Wisconsin resident was pinned to the ground, cuffed, and arrested for speaking at a council meeting for speaking out against an OpenAI Oracle data center. She went over her time by literally a few seconds. She did shout shame at the council members, but then she took her seat. And then police officers asked her to leave. She refused. She said, I sat down. What's the problem? But then she was eventually dragged out of the building in cuffs. A little over a week ago, the same story happened in Oklahoma. A man was arrested for speaking literally seconds over his allotted time. So I guess with these kind of scenes as the backdrop, I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about what's happening. And maybe, Daisy, maybe we could start with you. If we could talk a little bit about local issues of transparency and democratic decision-making regarding these data center projects.
Sure. Yeah, and I had mentioned earlier that so in New Mexico, the process about accessing public records is the acronym is IPRA, so Inspection of Public Records Act. And so our group actually had sent several requests to the county, to the Economic Development Department, to the state, to the governor's office, and every single time it came back again saying that this information was proprietary, right? So this was all under the veil of secrecy. And when we were able to get the industrial revenue bond application that the company submitted to the county, and it was literally blank. So they redacted almost all of it. And then after the vote, we found out so many other things. And they said, well, this is how we do economic development. And if we let people know our process and what was happening, then competitors can come in and, swoop in and take this deal away from us. But we were residents and we're community members. We're not big, tech companies that were trying to ruin or come in and take that proposal away. And then the other thing, so that's a big piece, right, of like lack of transparency in this whole process. And then the county, so there was 2 steps in this process. So the first step was that they had to approve a resolution to approve an ordinance. So many folks showed up for the resolution portion and spoke out against it. And there was so much fervor, and we had signs and we had cheering and clapping. And once that happened, and then they were going to vote at a public hearing for the ordinance, the county decided and created new rules of engagement around how the public can participate. So people were allowed 3 minutes to give public comment. However, they set up metal detectors into the building. There was one entrance, and people had to form a line just to get into the building. They had to have their bags searched. They had to go through a metal detector. And then we were told that you cannot bring any signs, you cannot have any cheering, no clapping. And if you do any of that, you will be arrested. And so they had also a line of law enforcement inside the chambers to basically monitor the coming and going, right? And to monitor what was happening. Nobody got arrested that day. However, later on, when another community member who sort of has taken upon himself to just really document as much as he can and what happens in these public meetings, and the county commission, as well as like their attorneys, have been really annoyed with him that he's recording too much. He's like, oh no, that's not our rules. You can't do that. We're not in session right now. And he's like, well, I'm just recording. I don't know. So what the problem is, and you're in a public forum, right? Public space. So he was banned from the county building, and he decided to challenge that ban and go back into the county building for another meeting. And he was arrested. He was escorted out of the chambers. He was put on the ground and arrested and spent a day in jail simply for turning on his phone and recording the whole process. So again and again, it's like, why, if this is a good deal, right? If this is good for our community, why are we shutting all of this down? This in terms of transparency and really trying to allow people access to these forums.
Yeah, something to add.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, something to add. I think along the lines of those EPRA requests, I think at some point we were still requesting and they deemed some of ours like burdensome. Like, oh, it's too burdensome to give you this documentation. Well, there was a reporter who knew one of the commissioners, and he kept getting that, like, this is deemed burdensome, and you have to wait 15 days for them to get back to you or something. He ended up calling this commissioner, and the commissioner was like, oh yeah, like, I'll give that to you. Sent an email, and it was all in one place. So it's like very clear too that they have just been delaying where they can, giving the information that they need to give us. And it was very clear and honestly really frustrating on that vote that it felt like that day, September 19th, I felt like I went and I couldn't stay the whole time. I was just getting too emotional and drained. It was like, it felt like if I didn't show up, nothing would have changed. Like in the sense that the commissioners had made their decision and they're sitting on their little podium and people are making comment in front of them and they're just like on their computer or looking down or looking away or choose to go to the bathroom. Like at some of our smaller meetings, we have a 15-minute break. We come back into session, we're making comment and they go off to the bathroom. And I literally told them, I was like, I went to the bathroom during that 15-minute break and you decided to go now and not listen to me. You know, they take a lot of these moments to just, I think they don't want to hear us. So
I think in the interest of time, I might move to the next question and then we'll have Q&As from the audience. But turn to our favorite thing is AI hype, but put data centers into that equation. So I think we're hearing a lot right now in education and all sectors of society that AI is the future and it is coming whether we want it or not. So I'm wanting now if you all could talk to us, if you had a chance to speak to people who are really invested in AI, especially people in positions of power. What might you tell them? What might you tell them that's happening in your community?
I think, like in my community, that there's a history already of extraction and of many hypes. If it's not AI, it was a solar panel hype. If it's not the solar panel, it's lithium hype. And as we speak, the lithium hype, which the county was 120% on board with, we saw it deflate in real time because the new administration doesn't really care much about a green future and transition to electric vehicles. So suddenly lithium doesn't seem that appealing anymore. Even though the county spent the last 5 years giving us all the propaganda and telling us that this is going to transform the valley, it's going to transform. That's what they used to tell us, transform. And then suddenly from de la noche a la mañana, from night and day, one of the big three developers that was slated to build capacity for lithium, suddenly they started to build the infrastructure to basically power gigantic hyperscaler data centers in that region where they were supposed to extract lithium. And it's because they see where the market is going, right? Like lithium is not so hot. Now it's this brand new industry, brand new data center, and that's what they're doing at the moment. So we saw Lithium Valley hype. Governor Newsom, for the first time in his life, set foot in my county. He didn't really care about Salton Sea being the most ecological disaster waiting to happening actually in the state of California. He didn't care about that. He cared that now they found lithium underneath the Salton Sea. So he came over, did a photo op. Lithium Valley is going to be the future. They started to coin that term. And we saw it deflate in our own eyes. And now it's the data center thing. So for us, it's nothing more than another chapter of extraction. And if it's not going to be data centers, it's going to be something else. But I keep thinking to myself, how many more sick children should we have to bear with just because the world needs this commodity nowadays? Because we might not see AI has some great capabilities in science and medicine, but those have real impact effects, and those effects are manifested in my community.
Yeah. Nicely said. So, and we were actually talking about this earlier, but so in New Mexico, something that's sort of unfortunate is our governor, although is a registered Democrat and speaks on democratic values, is very much in favor of not only the oil and gas industry in New Mexico, which is a very extractive industry and harmful to communities. But, this is her last year. And in terms of her legacy, I think it's turning to quantum computing. And so it feels like every governor wants to improve New Mexico to a certain level and wants to bring in some new sort of technology, some new thing. We're supposed to be the new Hollywood. I don't know if y'all know that. Come to New Mexico and make some movies. That was a few governors ago. And now, so this governor wants New Mexico's legacy, for her legacy to be a quantum computing hub. And so, making deals with companies around, University of New Mexico, NMSU, where the University in Las Cruces is starting an AI Institute, and all right in this idea of progress and like lifting up New Mexico, but at what cost? And I think that is so not only I would say for our state, but all over the entire country, is what are we sacrificing for? Yeah, again, so this commodity that essentially the big tech bros that are trying to develop it are trying to develop to the extent that it actually means that humans don't need to engage with that technology, right? They want to be able to create the AGI, right? Artificial generative intelligence. So there would be no human intervention. And if we continue down this process, not only are we like harming our communities now through the data center expansion, but there'll be like downstream consequences that we're not even considering, that it'll have large impacts around the country.
Yeah, and I think something I think about a lot is like AI is a convenience. Like, do any of us need it to live? Like we do, like it's not something we drink, it's not something we eat. And like personally, I've decided to boycott it all of that I can. Sometimes you search something and it just automatically comes up. And I find myself like, oh, it'd just be nice to just use this really quickly to search this one thing because it's quicker and easier, but it's a convenience and it comes at the cost of this, like, and there are arguments that, eating a burger, watching TV, is more like, takes more energy generation than, one little search, but still it is this big wave that's happening and it is not needed, like this is just being sold. This is another commodity and it's a convenience. And we're the only ones that can stop it. This is run by money right now. Like this is for money. This is to make a profit. And, I'm sure there's ways to balance it. But as a society, we can't balance that while the power is with the people who have money. As long as that's the case, there is going to be no balancing this. And so, yeah, I think it's a commodity and we don't need it. And it comes at the cost of communities like us and many, many more communities across the U.S. and the world. I mean, we have 12 others that are sort of in the works for New Mexico or hypotheticals. 12 others, including this massive one that's already going to double the CO2 emissions that our whole state is, contributes to. So how many more are happening across the United States that we literally just don't need, So.
Thank you. I knew that was going to be a beautiful discussion and a wonderful way to end. So I want to thank you all. Maybe we could have a round of applause and then we'll open it up to questions. If anyone has a question, again, I believe somebody in the room has a mic and they could pass it your way. And I think we have until 5:20, is that right? Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. That was incredible. I was wondering specifically about your project, Project Jupiter, if there were the environmental reviews that took place, that's where you're getting your CO2 numbers from? And if so, did they take place before or while you guys were organizing?
So I'm getting these numbers so they've just applied for air quality permits, actually, so they can through NMED, our New Mexico Environmental Department. So yeah, that's where we've gotten from is they've put out air quality permit applications and they listed the amount of CO2 is a big one, but there's a lot of noxious oxides and other pollutants and particulates. And they split the microgrids into, instead of it being one, they split them into two so they could fall under these hazardous pollutants, fall under the limits on both of them. Because if this were one, they would massively surpass those limits. So there are two. And then the environmental, whatever, they didn't even do one.
Right, yeah, that's what I was going to say. So part of the lies, and again, the propaganda was that they say, and it's actually part of the IRB process. So part of the application for the industrial revenue bonds, they have to submit an environmental assessment to the county. And in the application, it states that they plan to do it 6 months after the project has been approved, right? And we did question that. We said, how does that make any sense? What if, right? Like, you have to know before you start, constructing stuff. They said, no. We have to design it and we have to begin construction and then we can do it. And otherwise, we'd sort of be wasting money and effort if we were able to do that, or if we did that and then realize that we can't do that because there's some sort of environmental harm. So, and so now it's like, okay, it's almost 6 months later. It's like, we need to ask now, right? We need to force their hand, but also the commissioners, again, who are making these decisions on September 19th, all said, well, don't worry, we're going to be watching the project. We're going to be on the company's backs, and we're going to make sure that they're not doing anything to harm the community. And the one person who said that the loudest and proudest, the commissioner, he actually resigned from his position in December so he can run for county assessor. So he's not watching this project at all, actually.
And he's getting his running paid for by Project Jupiter, hypothetically.
Right.
Yeah.
So there you go. So at this point, there has not been any sort of environmental assessment for this project that we know of. I think the microphone up here. Sorry.
Yes, what I understand and everything is the most advantage in nature for humans we enjoying now is the most damage in the environment and the person's life is affecting, especially for people of color. That is the reason. The most advantage that we enjoy now, with the machinery, with the cell phone, with everything, is the most damage for environment and people, especially people of color. I'm right or wrong?
Well, in my community, it's like over 90% Hispanic Latino. So it also kind of speaks to like environmental racism because the developer is from like Huntington Beach. And we always kind of tell them like, why don't you try that at Huntington Beach and see how that goes, right? Put it right next to like those people's backyards and see how the response you get. But, they utilize communities like ours, like over 90% Latino Hispanic, who historically has been disenfranchised politically. We don't have a lot of say in Sacramento. We don't have a lot of say, not even at the regional level. We're highest unemployment rate in the entire state. When COVID happened, we had the highest infection and death rate in the entire state as well. And that is also not a coincidence, right? It speaks to just how disinvested and quite frankly exploited like communities like Imperial Valley are all the time. Like whenever there is an emergency, we're the ones to also pay for those consequences as well. We don't see like the amount of responses like in cities, in big cities, or in like wider neighborhoods like Huntington Beach. We're kind of like always the ones to pay the price for whatever advancement in technology. Now it's data centers. 2 years ago, it was Lithium Valley, and we were also going to pay the price for that because people wanted their grain vehicles and the country wanted to move in that direction. Which, you can make an argument for lithium or not lithium, but once again, why do communities like mine have to pay the price for that? Because you better believe that we're going to get like crumbs out of that, right?
Yeah, and I'll definitely agree with that and say that in New Mexico, there are, in different places in New Mexico for sure, also just the oil and gas industry and the Permian Basin, right? Most of those workers are come from immigrant families. A lot of them are coming mixed status. And they're killing themselves really so that New Mexico can have revenue like to fund its schools and like other departments. So there's definitely environmental racism that is going on, that people of color are sacrificed in our state. I'll also say, though, that it does have to do with class and the fact that not only, I mean, these companies, when we've talked about it, I've talked about it in the past, is they're coming from outside New Mexico. So it's very, not just extractive, but this is a history of New Mexico of like folks coming in and saying, hey, this will be good for you. And sort of planting their feet in a little bit into the ground, making money, and then leaving, right? So all of the companies, all of the real big money that's going to be made from these projects are for the profits are going to be going outside the state. They're not for the people of New Mexico. So for sure, right? Like this is projects and these are industries that are for wealthy people that don't even live in the communities that they're being constructed in.
Something I thought of too is it's like these companies I think are trying to find places in which it's hard for the political folks that are making decisions to like it's harder for them to say no. You know, I think the $165 billion project is how much this project is worth, and they're giving our county back how much? 300 million?
360 million.
360 million over 30 years, which is like 0.2% of that 165 billion. But to us, it's like that's money, you know? So it's like finding a place where it's harder to say no, even though it's a measly amount compared to the damage that's happening.
Thank you so much for sharing all your information and for your advocacy, I really have to say. I have a question probably for resources. So in the library we have a little committee working together to try and map out the data centers that are most likely associated with us. The reason being, which you probably know, is the CSU has something like 2 million licenses for AI, and that's over and above the data centers that we associated with. We obviously are a Canvas campus, so that's AWS. We are a Google campus, so all of that data. So in addition to that, so we are just trying to provide a resource where we have that kind of information available, as well as we're tracking some of the policy. So the California policy, obviously, but a lot of our data centers, I didn't even know about the Calexico development, which is going to probably be one of the ones that our data is going to be going to, because it will probably be the closest one. So we've approximated data centers. So it's going to be Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, obviously LA with their big data centers. But we can't be precise because of the same reasons that you say, all of this redacted information. So we're tracking the timeline, we're tracking the policy. But my question really is, your kind of grassroots resources that we have, is there like some kind of community forums where you're sharing that information? So I know that you're coming from two different places like that. We will be able to incorporate some of that information to share with our communities. We're hoping this is going to be a community resource to do that advocacy, but from like the CSU type level. So like those kind of, how can we connect with those grassroots levels to get that kind of ground level information?
I mean, yeah, I guess we're working on a website right now for Project Jupiter. Well, we're calling it, we're what's the word? We're expecting more than just Project Jupiter. So we're not totally like our name isn't totally focused on that. We're in the process of like really finalizing that. I don't know when it's done, but I think we have the URL possibly.
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do. Yeah. So we're forming a new group, and it'll be named, or we have named it, Fight Chihuahuan Desert Extraction, and then the acronym would be FCDX. So without the E, .live. And yeah, we're planning on putting those resources on that, at a minimum on that website. We've gone back and forth about social media, whether or not we're going to utilize it, and, again, considering that those are data centers. But also I think we can also connect afterward, because there are several groups around the country that are also fighting this I've been connected with as well. And so I think there's just a lot of different connections that can be made.
And I'll also add, I can add that website and any other resources to a email. If you RSVP to the event, I can share that out.
I was wondering, since you were from New Mexico and when he was from the Valley, if you'd be able to answer if you've seen any like cross collaboration or kind of or organization between people from different areas and communities where these data centers are really primarily affecting, or is that something you're looking to develop further?
So it's there has been like limited collaboration because like for example, like me and Daisy just came back from like a training in Tucson that like is about like organizing against data centers. And one of the things that, I mean, it was many groups, nonprofits as well as like grassroots organizations as well, who, and also people like with no name, just straight up organizers on the ground. We realized quickly that like all of our stories are eerily similar. When they were telling me their story with Project Blue, with Amazon in Arizona, as they were telling me their story, it was like, wow, that sounds play by play like what happened to us. So even though like in our case, it's the utilization of like outdated zoning laws. So like for us, it's a little bit organizing different than like what's going on with their projects. So there's been like limited capacity. Like for example, like in my case, like I teach that as my day job. So I organize when I can and at the capacity that I can at the time, because I also have responsibilities to take, right? So it's at least on my end, it's a little bit difficult to add even more to my plate. So I personally decide to focus on our fight and as much as we can. But I have learned things like from other organizations in other places. So we're starting to kind of like look into how other organizations and people are moving and fighting back against, so that we're learning from them, and like either we're learning from like mistakes or we're learning from like victories to try to apply for our data center fight, at least speaking from the one that we're currently fighting.
I'd have to like, agree with that too. It's like, I think for us, we have a group of folks like all working on this together, but again, it's overwhelming. And it's like, I think a lot of us are also doing other community organization or have jobs or other things. And it's like finding the time to deal with this. But I agree, like, and this is something I think I've thought about as a filmmaker too, is like, there's so many stories of so many communities all across the US that are fighting this and this exact same thing. And I think there's a big story there and there's a big opportunity to connect. But I guess, in the way that things are, I think it's meant to be like hot, like they make it overwhelming, like that's how they have the resources, the money, the lawyers, the background to do all this. And meanwhile, we're all like, all right, we have like a retired electrical engineer who was able to like break down some of the air quality permit applications for us. And we're like, thanks for that. Okay. Anyone have a lawyer friend? You can do this. Like we are like leaning on each other's strengths, which is cool. But yeah, like it's not our full-time job, yet at least. And so it's hard to like even find time for that and then, connect. But like this has been awesome to connect. And I would think it would be great to have more opportunities to connect and hear more stories.
So I'll say after this took place, and this had to do with I was previously with a different organization. But anyway, so some groups out of Ciudad Juarez had reached out to us and said, hey, the water issues obviously will affect us as well because we do share the same aquifer as our neighbors to the south. And so we met with some folks back in October, and we've been meeting regularly since then. And there's some groups out of El Paso, and there's actually data centers that are moving into El Paso as well. So we're maybe going to become the new data center valley. Like, no, this is not a good premonition. And so there's been some collaboration to a certain extent, but also like for us, I think that and for me in doing this work is there's the systems are very different. So like, and even like, in California, you're talking about like how California does environmental stuff is way different than, and not way different, but it's like, oh yeah, that acronym, I would have no idea what that meant. I don't know what your rules are. And that's what we're finding out. It's the same thing in like New Mexico versus Texas, and politically also, quite different. And then trying to sort of incorporate what does that mean for a whole other country, right? In Ciudad Juarez, and their different levels of government. And so we've actually struggled a little bit, I'll be honest, over the past few months, and really trying to settle in like, how do we want to land in this space, and how can we really support each other in our fight? That's not like overstepping and not sort of telling, I'm not going to tell Texas how to fight their fight, and they're not going to tell us how to fight our fight, right? How can we do this collaboratively? And then the same thing with Ciudad Juarez. And actually, there is an international meeting that's taking place in about a week in Juarez. And so, and that's the other thing. So it gets a little complicated. There's some folks that can't cross into the United States, so we oftentimes are going there. So they're really sort of excited that this air quality meeting was happening, and it is agreement between Texas, New Mexico, and Mexico that they would work collaboratively around environmental issues along the border. And the New Mexico Environment Department, the head of the climate department, is going to be talking about data centers. And so I couldn't make the meeting on Sunday, but they were like, great, we're planning to protest. We're going to do this. These are going to be our slogans. This is what we're going to do. Like, what do we want to pressure her just to sort of, do and to stop this project, or at a minimum, right, to hold her accountable. So, yeah, so I think there's been a push and pull. I think we're moving toward a little more easier success that we can find. But it hasn't been easy. And again, because all the systems work differently, that makes it a little bit more complicated. Yeah.
So I think maybe if there's like one last brief question, we can take it, but I'll see if there's anyone who has a pressing question. Sure. Yeah.
I was just wondering about demographics, and if you've noticed that there's a lot of youth involved, or if it's more older folks or people in careers, or who you've seen has been able to do the most organizing, but also if they're not able to do organizing, maybe like online fervor.
I think for us, at least in Las Cruces, like we have just a generally, Las Cruces is like 120,000 people, and I'd like to say we have a really close community. And that's been the good thing, is like we don't have a problem getting people involved. It's just, what can we do at this point now? Like what's our action? But yeah, like I don't know. I have a lot of friends that are like old, like my parents' age, which is really funny. I'm like, hey, like let's go. Like we went and camped the river for the river release, But like Beth is a retired lawyer, and she's like involved in this project. Her friend is the retired electrical engineer. There's a lot of youth still involved. There's a lot of like it's just all around, which is, I think, is really cool. And maybe that's just a part of like Las Cruces being such a tight knit community. And then, yeah, like still connected to, other folks, like even across in El Paso and in Texas and in Juarez. Yeah, that's like what I've noticed, at least.
Yeah, in Sunland Park in Santa Teresa. I mean, I think there's different pockets in different places. So yeah, Las Cruces looks different than Sunland Park in Santa Teresa. I'll say that for sure. And what I will speak to that I think, and which is actually the unfortunate piece, is why more people actually don't come out, and the militarization of the borderlands. And Santa Teresa and again Sunland Park are just a mile, the data center itself is a mile away from the port of entry, but it's really Ciudad Juarez is the backyard, and that specific community is definitely heavily monitored. Border Patrol is always out. Local law enforcement does cooperate with them. So sometimes there's that constraint that, seems like, well, why aren't they standing up? And a friend of mine put it so awfully, but so truthfully, is that the boot is bigger in our community, right? In that community. And so it makes it a little bit more difficult to stand up. And I sort of said this earlier on our podcast, but that really what that means is that the people that have the privilege to stand up really sort of, we're asking them to make space, like do that, because there's people that don't and can't, because detention is real, right? And like being disappeared is real in our community. And that's definitely something that's not talked about and doesn't, there's no headlines about that, but it does happen.
I think in my case has been a little interesting because I've been organizing my community for a few years now, and for different causes, whether it's like the trying not to get local governments to criminalize homelessness, to like immigration issues and whatnot, and the turnout's always kind of like the same demographic of people, usually like younger millennials and Gen Z, college educated individuals that usually come out in support for those things. This issue, however, has been extremely interesting for me to navigate because I've had to organize with like people from all sorts of political spectrum, like all the way from like heart right all the way to like the heart left. It seems like, as you saw in the picture, how close that development is to like homes. So it actually kind of like awoken something into like, those are middle class neighborhoods. Those are like almost $1 million homes that you're seeing there. So it's usually people that wouldn't really come out and like support. Now they're coming out, and now they're like off-duty police officers, like off-duty border patrol officers, because usually they wouldn't come out for like immigration, right? But they're coming out against data centers, and whatever the reason may be, we are very like laser focused. Like, look, we know we're not going to agree on absolutely everything. Stay focused, stay grounded, like laser focused against data centers, and we can fight it amongst each other later. But right now, it's this objective right now, and it's been working. I mean, we were able to delay the largest proposed data center in the state of California. So fingers crossed that we actually are successful in not doing that. But also we've kind of like built this pipeline of information where like, hey, I know you care about this data center because it's literally in your backyard. However, take a look to the north of the Imperial County, because this one might not get constructed and there's 10 coming in the north. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about people like, hey, your water bill, your electricity bill might rise, and immediately that's like the key for like middle class families who usually wouldn't get involved, right, in like the political process and whatnot. Now when they hurt their pockets, specifically at a time in America like right now where everyone is hurting, an increase in their any utility bill is an attack against them. So that's what I've experienced so far. Like, this seems like it's a across the board unpopular take to be pro data center in our community at the moment.
All right, I think that's a great place to end. Again, if we can thank our guests for sharing their knowledge. And again, I will provide some more information in a follow-up email. If you RSVP'd, I'll send that out soon. All right, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.